Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been setting up the grounds to delve into the history of the Muvendhars, the Great Three, in the past few episodes. We have tried to establish the beginning of the time period of the emergence of their rule by connecting it to happenings in the north of India as well as references in Tolgapiyam and Sangam literature, and we have seen how urbanization must have emerged with the emergence of the rule of the three in the south, coinciding with the second urbanization in the north of India. This was also the time period that saw the heretic faiths of Buddhism and Jainism rise to prominence. The Tolgapiyam has several references to the Muvendhar, Van Puhal Moovar Tan Polil Varaipin being a reference in the aphorism 75 of Seiyuriyal, and not just passing references but giving the insignia of the rulers like their flower and their flag, going to show that their rule must have been well established by then, that is around the 6th century BCE. While the body of Sangam literature follows the Tolgapiyam in terms of timeline, there are several poems that show how the great three were vying amidst themselves for supremacy. A very interesting poem, Purananuru poem 55, sung by Madurai Marudan Ilanahanar, that sings the praise of the Pandya king, Pandiyan Ilavandigai Palli Tunjiya Nanmaran, under the Padantinai, Tinai being the discipline, and the subdivision being a Thurai. Here, very interestingly, the Thurai is known as Seviyari Vuruvu, that is, giving counsel or advice. We have already seen how with the establishment of the Arasu and the rise of their military power, the necessity for laying down moralistic guidelines for the Vendu arose, and that there is a subdivision under the heading giving counsel or advice in the Tolgapiyam shows how ancient Tamizh took their ethical and moral standings very seriously and how even the ruler had to adhere to them. And here in this poem, Madurai Marudan Ilanahanar sings, Karai Midatru Annal Kamar Senni Pirainudal Vilangum Urukan Pola Vendu Membatta Poondar Mara. Maran is a name that typically denotes the Pandya rulers, and here it denotes the king wearing the garland made of the vembu, that is the neem tree's flower. Here the poet praises the Pandya king and says he is the third eye or the netrikan of the three eyes of Lord Shiva, meaning that the right and left eye are the Chola and Chera kings respectively. The next lines emphasize the moral code for the king to follow. Kadum sinatta kolkalirum kadal pariya kalimavum நெடுங்கொடிய நிமிர்த்தேரும் நெஞ்சு உடைய புகழ் மறவரும் என நான்குடன் மாண்டது ஆயினும் மாண்ட அறநெறி முதற்றே அரசின் கொற்றம். O king, you may have a great fourfold army with the elephants, the horses, the chariots and the foot soldiers, but your rule is only as strong as your righteousness. அதனால் நமர் என கோல் கோடாது பிறர் என குணம் கொள்ளாது ஞாயிற்று அன்ன வெண்திரள் ஆண்மையும் திங்கள் அன்ன தன்பெரும் சாயலும் வானத்து அன்ன வன்மையும் மூன்றும் உடையாகி இல்லோர் கையற நீ நீடு வாழிய நெடுந்தகை. So, dear king, do not be impervious to the flaws of your kith and kin. Do not punish the flaws of those outside your circle just because they are outside. In other words, the poet extols the king to mete out equal treatment to all those under his rule. With benevolence that resembles the sun in valor and the moon in kindness and the rain in generosity, provide for all those in need. தாழ் நீர் வெண்தலை புணரி அலைக்கும் செந்தில் நெடுவேள் நிலைய காமர் வியன்துறை கடுவழி தொகுப்ப ஈண்டிய வடுஆள் எக்கர் மணலினும் பரவோ. And if you live by this dictum, your fame will live forever on this earth. Do you know for how long? For as many years as there are grains of sands on the beaches of the great temple of Tiruchendur. So this poem reveals how old the Murugan abode of Tiruchendur is. Well, there are also other poems in the Sangam works claiming similar supremacy for the Cholas over the Pandyas and the Cheras, and if such poems find a place in Sangam works, It shows how well established their rules must have been by that period, that is the beginning of 3rd century BCE. Though it is a body of panegyric poetry, the Sangam corpus is a very important source of history of the ancient Tamizh. And given that it has works dedicated to a single ruler, goes to establish the antiquity of the lineage of these Tamil kings. For example, in the Sangam corpus, the great Chola king Karigala Peruvalathan has two works dedicated to him, the Pattinapalai and the Purnaratruppadai. Similarly, the Madurai Kanji and Nidinalvadai sing the praises of the great Pandya king Pandyan Nedunjeliyan. And it is interesting to note that in the Pattupattu, 3 works are dedicated to the praise of chieftains. Sirubanatruppadai sings the praise of Thondaiman Ilantirayan, Perumbanatruppadai sings the praise of Nalliyakodan, and Kootharatruppadai, also known as Malaipadugadam, sings the praise of the great ruler of Konganam, Nannan say Nannan, Nannan's son Nannan. K.D. Tirunavukarasu, the historian from the University of Madras, shows how there are around 164 references in the Purananuru that are directly connected to 59 chieftains, including 14 tribal chieftains, and how it was the benevolence and patronage of the chieftains more than the kings that enabled the ancient Tamils to achieve a high watermark in the fine arts. So, at least during the Sangam period, we know that the kings and the chieftains coexisted peacefully. An extremely important inscription that helps us understand the time period of the Muvendhar, an inscription as important as that of the rock edict inscription of King Ashoka himself, is the Hathikumba inscription given by the king Karavela. King Karavela was considered a very powerful ruler of the Magha Mehavana dynasty that ruled over Kalinga, that is today's Odisha. He was a Jain king. He was crowned Chakravartin at the age of 24 in the year 176 BCE. During his reign, he had the habit of inscribing his yearly achievements on rocks, just like Emperor Ashoka, and these edicts are found in the Hathikumba caves that we today known as Udayagiri. Details about his administration, legal procedures, accounting and coinage, and most interestingly, even about education and sports are found on these inscriptions. They are written in the Prakrit language using the Brahmi script. They are written year upon year, and in his 11th regnal year, that falls in 165 BCE, he mentions a Dramila Sangha, a Dravida confederacy of kings that existed to the south of his kingdom. And Karavela mentions how this confederacy had been in existence for over 113 years and how that confederacy was a constant source of threat to his rule from the south. Now, if this statement is taken as authentic, then the confederacy must have been formed around 278 BCE. Dr. K.D. Tirunavukarasu, in the Chieftains of the Sangam Age, which was his PhD thesis, clearly points out how this was the time period when the Mauryan Empire was under the rule of Bindusara, and historically it is recorded how Bindusara led the Mauryan army into the south. There is testimony to this in the accounts of the Tibetan historian Taranada. Perhaps this confederacy was what prevented the Mauryans from getting a foothold in the Tamil country. There are several references in Sangam poems to the Mauryan invasions that came into the south. Obviously, these invasions must have failed, as subsequently no part of Tamil country formed a part of the Mauryan Empire, and Emperor Ashoka mentions the 3 kings only as his southern neighbors. We earlier saw how in the Ashokan inscriptions, King Ashoka mentions the moral invasion that he was able to make into the deep south. Perhaps he didn't realize that even that was possible because of the magnanimous and open attitude of the Tamil people. So, could this have been because of the strong confederacy that Karavela mentions? History shows that at one point of time in 278 BCE, though the Sangam works show how the 3 emperors were vying for supremacy with each other, they had the common sense to understand that unity is strength and form a coalition to put up a formidable front against enemies coming in from the north. a coalition that lasted over a century. 3 poems from the Agananoru mention the Mauryan invasion. Being love poems, the references are rather fleeting and a little out of context, but at the same time are very important from a historical point of view. For example, if we look at poem 69 in Agananoru, sung by Umattur Kirar Mahanar Parangottanar, belonging to the Palaithinai, the poem goes, Vin poru nedungodai iyalther moriyer பொன் புனை திகிரி திரிதர குறைத்த அரையிறந்து அகன்றனர் ஆயினும். When the Mauryans came in their majestic chariots with their tall parasols, the chariot wheels that had iron rims cut grooves into the pathways along which they came. These pathways were made over the rocky mountainous terrain in the north. In the Sangam poems, there is this term, Molipeyardeyam, which means they came from regions outside Tamil country where people spoke non-Tamil dialects. These hilly regions were mostly occupied by hill tribes, and what is interesting is that in almost all the poems that refer to the Mauryans, this creation of pathways over mountainous regions are mentioned. In Purananuru 175, that sings the praises of the chieftain Adanungan, Kallil Athrenar sings, விண்பொரு நெடுங்குடை கொடித்தேர் மோரியர் தின்கதிர் திகிரி திரிதர குறைத்த உலக இடைக்கழி அரைவாய் நிலைய மலர்வாய் மண்டிலத்து அன்னநாளும் பலர் புறவு எதிர்ந்த அறத்துறை நின்னே. When the Mauryans came over the mountain paths with their chariots, pathways were created to facilitate the movement of the chariot wheels. These pathways were created with a lot of bends. O Adanunga, in generosity, you resemble the Arathurai, the houses of charity that fed all those who labored in creating those pathways. In Agananuru poem 251, sung by Mamulanar, again under Palaithinai, which shows separation of the heroine and the hero, we come across yet a few important historical references. The poem goes, Thudum sendana tholum setrum, ஓதி ஒன்னுதல் பசலையும் மாயும் வீங்கு இழை நெகிழ சாஐ செல்லலொடு நாம் படர்கூறும் அருந்துயர் கேட்பின். The Thori, the confidant, consoles the heroine, saying that she would soon be relieved of her misery of being separated from her lover. Why? An emissary has been sent to the north, where the hero has gone, explaining the pathetic state of the heroine, asking him to return at once. And here comes the most interesting next line, which is a piece of history. Nandan verukkai eidinum mattu avan tangalar vaali tholi. Here, the poet refers to King Nanda of the Nanda dynasty. The Nanda dynasty ruled over Mauryan territories during the 5th and 4th century BCE. They came to power by overthrowing the Saishunaga dynasty that ruled a large part of the eastern India during that period. The Nandas built on the success of their Saishunaga predecessors, who had already laid down a very clear centralized administrative system. Ancient sources credit the Nandas with amassing huge amounts of wealth, a result of the introduction of currency and new taxation systems. So this is the wealth that Mamulanar was referring to when he sang, O heroine, do not worry. Even if there is an opportunity for the hero to amass as much fortune as the wealthy Nandas, he will not stay back but come right away to you. Well, the last Nanda king was overthrown by Chandragupta Maurya, who ruled between 350 and 295 BCE. So the hero of Mamulanar was set against the backdrop of the 5th or 4th century BCE, when the Nanda empire was at its peak. Now the next lines go, Vel kodithunai kaalanna punaider kosar தொல் மூதாலத்து அரும்பனை பொதியில் இன்னிசை முரசம் கடிப்பு இகுத்திரங்க தெம்முனை சிதைத்த ஞான்றை மோகூர் பணியாமையின். The Kosar, a hill tribe from the north, came down the hills beating their drums to the territory of Mogur. Now there is a lack of clarity as to the location of Mogur, as there are 2 or 3 places even today in Tamil country that have the same name. Here the lines go, the Kosar came into the Mogur Mandram, that is the common public space, beating their drums, and the Mogur chieftain would not accede defeat in war but stood up to them. Now the Kosars were a very ancient tribe spread out in the regions of Tulunadu and Konganam, covering the northwest of Kerala and parts of Karnataka. There are innumerable references to them in the Sangam works. Nan-moli Kosar goes an epithet that shows them as multilingual. This was probably because they were spread over several linguistic territories. But what is unusually interesting is that there are a number of epithets in the Sangam poems describing them as Vaimoli Kosar, Semmar Kosar, Neelmoli Kosar, Ondrumoli Kosar, that claimed they were a very good-natured people known for their honesty and benevolence. Recently, the town of Tirthahalli, nestled in the foothills of the Western Ghats in the Shimoga district of Karnataka, was in the news. When I read the report in the Hindu dated 12th of December 2022, it mentioned that the people of this region were known for their Satbhava and Sajnike, that meant good thoughts and good conduct. Now, this immediately rang a bell. How often does one come across descriptions like this in this day and age? Upon looking up the map, I was stunned to find that the regions of Tirthahalli were exactly the same as those of the Kosar described in the Sangam works. Could it be the influence of Mother Nature on the psyche of a people that bestows them with such goodness? Goodness that remains unchanged for over 2 millennia. Well, getting back to our poem, Maamulanar goes, Pahai thalai vanda maakelu daanai vambamoriyar, Punai தேர் நேமி உருளிய குறைத்திலங்கு வெள் அருவிய அரைவாய் உம்பர். So the Kosar sought the support of the Mauryans to defeat the chieftain of Mogur. Pathways were created in the mountainous region to enable the Mauryans to come in with their large chariots. Oh my dear, your hero has gone crossing that very pathway to seek his fortune. Yet another poem, Agananuru 281, again by Maamulanar, set in the same Palaithinai, the discipline of separation. He mentions another tribe, the Vadugar. The poem goes, Seyvadu therindisiன் தோழி அல்கலும் அகலுள் ஆண்மை அச்சறக் கூறிய சொல் பழுது ஆகும் என்றும் அஞ்சாது. Here, the heroine asks her friend, Oh my dear, what shall we do? He made tall promises that he would never leave me, but now he has gone away seeking his fortunes. He is not in the least bit concerned about breaking his word. The poem goes on to describe the valiant Vadugar, Kanai kural isaikum virai selal kadunganai, muranmigu Vadugar munnura. Those with the bow and arrow, and the arrow has a term called Kanai in Tamil, which is because of the sound that it creates while being thrown from the bow, which sounds like the neighing of a horse. Kanaithal, therefore Kanai. The Vadugar are shown as a hill tribe who lived to the north of Vengadam, that is today's Tirupati. They spoke a tongue called Vadugu. Today some scholars opine that this could refer to a corrupted form of Tamil, that is Vadupatta Moli, Vadugu. So here are the next lines. The Mauryans marched south. The fearsome Vadugars with their bow and arrow led the way, and the Mauryans followed behind them. A passage was created in the heights of the tall misty mountains. And do you know where your lover has gone? He has gone across these very pathways into the north country in search of his fortune. And again, there are several poems in which the Vadugar are found mentioned. One of these gives us a clearer idea as to the region from which they ruled. Agananuru 253, sung by Nakirar, again the same Palaithinai, where the hero has left the heroine and gone in search of his fortune. Vantol Vadugar Perumahan, Perisai Erumai Nalnattu Ulladai, Airi Yaru Irandanar Ayinum. The strong Vadugar who ruled over the Mahishanadu. Now Mahisham means buffalo, so it is literally translated into Tamil and called Erumai Nadu. Erumai Nadu is shown nestled in the Western Ghats, and it is across this Vadugar territory that the hero has gone seeking his fortune, goes the poem. So what was the fortune that all these heroes were going in search of crossing these mountains? It is very interesting to note that there are references to gold mines in Karnataka in few of the poems, and they were going in search of gold. So that the Mauryans who defeated the Nandas and who spread their rule almost all over the north of India and the Deccan could not gain a foothold in the Tamil country vouches for the strong confederacy that the Muvendhars should have formed. A coalition formed in 278 BCE as per Karavela's inscription, and a confederacy which, with all its political nuances, was in existence for more than a century, establishes the fact that the rule of the Great Three should have emerged at least a couple of centuries before that time period. So, probably from the 6th century BCE. We will continue with our exploration of the emergence of the rule of the three in the coming episodes. Vanakkam.